Across the globe, the Earth seems under attack from its own forces. Massive earthquakes, devastating droughts, and horrific tornadoes have caused billions of dollars in damage and taken thousands of lives. Do all these events give us any indication of the upcoming hurricane season? What plans are in place by the city and county for evacuation or survival? And what can we be doing now to secure our property and safety? Tonight, how to best weather the current storm season. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. Joining us tonight are Frank Billingsley, Chief Meteorologist, KPRC, Channel 2. Craig Roll, President, Coastal Building Inspection and Engineering. And Harris County Judge, Ed Emmett. Before we start, remember you can share your thoughts throughout the show on Twitter using hashtag Houston8. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Frank, let me start right with you. From all the things that have happened over the past summer, or spring actually, can that give us any indication of what is yet to come this summer?
It can, because the weather patterns that have been in place to bring us this horrific tornado season that we saw in the spring are going to be in place, it looks like, to some degree into the hurricane season, which means very hot, dry air over us and this high-pressure system in the Atlantic bringing all of these southeast winds that we've been having, the humidity. That's going to bring possibly storms right into the Gulf. But whereas last year that high wasn't as strong, it's stronger this year. So we see that. In addition, the jet stream is to the north of us. That's why we've missed out on the rain, and that's why they've had such a horrible tornado season. That jet stream not coming our way is an indication that the upper level winds aren't going to be there to help knock these storms down. So the forecast for the season is a big season, well above normal, and that's part of the reason why.
I was looking at some research that I did that said meteorologists, the whole group of you, all together, have said that this is going to be a severe season, but not worse than last year's. But for us, last year wasn't really a bad season.
Right.
So the difference is what?
Well, you know, it's all playing with numbers. It's if you get hit, right?
Then it's a bad season.
Right. Of course. I mean, Alicia, we had 4 storms that season. One of them was Alicia. Andrew in Miami, there were 7 storms that season. One of them was Andrew. So it's more about quality than quantity when it comes to these things. But like I said, the Atlantic water was a little warmer last year. We saw a little more action last year, but that Bermuda high was weaker, so everything stayed in the Atlantic. We may not see quite as many storms this year, but with a stronger high out there, that gives us a better chance for what is coming to come this way. So the Gulf of Mexico is primed. And there's been some interesting research lately showing that in April of 2010, a year ago, the Gulf was relatively cool. This year, it's much warmer. So the Atlantic may have changed a little bit, but the Gulf has really changed because we've been so hot and dry. And so is the Gulf, hot and dry. So it's a hotter Gulf of Mexico with a high-pressure system bringing in storms. They'll stay together. So we're going to have to watch out this year.
What time period do you see it being the most active? Can you predict something like that?
You can't, but you can say it's least active in October and November. Even though we go from June 1st to November 30th, the latest we've ever had a storm on the Texas coast is Jerry in 1989. That was October 15th. So that's the latest that we've ever had. So that's kind of a benchmark that usually things are going to calm down for us by the time we get to the end of September.
Okay, Judge, let me ask you this. Hearing all of that information...
I don't like what I just heard.
Right? Does the county prepare differently according to what they hear forecast-wise, or are you guys in place?
The key piece was, if you're hit by one storm, it's a bad season. It doesn't matter how many other storms there are. So our Office of Emergency Management, all the area, cities, the state, everybody prepares the same every season under the assumption that we are going to be hit.
Lessons learned from previous seasons.
It's a constant learning process. But I guess the thing that worries me the most this time, as I go around and I give speeches, I have people come up and say, you know, we took your advice and we hunkered down, to use that phrase, but we went without power and we're going to get out of town next time. And I just have to remind people, if you're not in danger of a storm surge, you need to stay where you are until the storm passes. So in essence, we're telling people it's okay to have a secondary evacuation plan for after the storm. Figure out what your family needs to do if you go without power. But otherwise, everything's still the same. Everybody needs to have a plan for their family. They need to have a kit to get them through the storm.
I'm guessing after what we've seen in May, people are going to be listening more closely to you.
I hope so, but again, the last 2 years have been benign as far as hurricane. Everybody talks about last year. Nothing even hit the mainland U.S. as best I remember.
Right. Came right into Brownsville, maybe a little south.
So,
yeah.
We never were even threatened, and so I hope that doesn't breed a certain complacency.
And let me speak to the storm surge that you were speaking of, because when I came along, surge and wind were all coupled as one. And I don't think people really understood surge. I think they thought a surge would be like a tsunami, like this wall of water. And it's not. A surge is a flood that occurs gradually, and it can start in the morning, even when the storm is 18 hours away. People didn't understand that, but they're going to understand it next time, because we've learned separate the surge warnings from the wind warnings. So we're going to tell people, to the judge's point, you are in a surge zone, you need to leave. You are not. You do not need to leave. Here's when we're expecting your area to flood and how badly. So we've learned to be much more specific about potential flood threats from hurricanes than even 4 years ago.
Okay, but there are going to be some people out there, and Craig, I'll get to you in 1 second. I haven't forgotten you're down there. That people are going to say, but they're predicting this area, but oftentimes predictions miss what actually happens. So even if you say the surge is going to happen in this area, I'm over here, what if they're wrong? I should flee. Would you be wrong or not when it comes to surges and where the water is going?
No, when we call for an evacuation, we understand that the prediction is nearly always wrong. I mean, if you look at the storms, at the last minute, they all tend to wiggle a little bit one way or the other. So we will always err on the side of caution. We'll call for a larger evacuation area than probably needs.
And focusing on where it's going to go is the mistake. Because once that water gets pushed your way, it's like if you're in a swimming pool and you start pushing water toward the side of the pool, it can go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what happened to Bolivar, frankly, during Ike.
Yeah, well, we saw in Japan that even though it was the tsunami, what you see on these videos, and they move much quicker than we would probably experience, you see this water just come in. It's not that horror movie kind of wall of water that comes and collapses. It just floods in.
And you see on the internet, because everybody looks at the internet and looks at the hurricane site, and you see a cone of uncertainty, and you see a line right through the middle of it. And you say, well, that's where it's going to hit. No, it's going to hit, especially if it starts off of Cuba or the Florida Straits. That means it has a long time to push a lot of water our way. Much different than if it starts, like Alicia did, south of Louisiana, or even in the Bay of Campeche. It's a much different storm. But when it has a long way to go, it's like being at the back of the bathtub and pushing water toward the front. If you're at the back, you can push a lot more water toward the front than if you're right up here. So knowing where the storm is, how fast it's moving, where it's going, all very important. But don't take it for granted that just because that line is up to the north of me, I'm safe.
Yeah, and we're going to get back to you guys in just a minute. But over to Craig now.
Welcome, sir.
My concern is, all right, I have seen videos from all over the world of homes, lives being destroyed, devastated. Is there anything we can be doing right now to better ensure that our property and our safety will be in place after a storm?
Well, the new codes that they came out with, about 3 years ago, are a lot more stringent. During, let me back that up, about 5 years ago, right before the last storm, Hurricane Ike, we looked at probably over 3,000 different roofs that were damaged. That's the main thing that we are trying to promote, is the envelope of the structure, mainly the roof. If your roof goes, then obviously you're going to have water damage, the damaged sheetrock, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we want to do is make sure that a few items are taken care of prior to the hurricane warnings or the 36-hour warning. The main thing is the shutter systems. You'd like to have shutter systems throughout all your exterior openings. What a lot of people forget about is the gable end vents. And the gable end vents up in the gable of the roof. There'll be a round vent or a square vent, triangle vent. That right there is going to let a lot of the air pressure get into the attic. Once the air pressure is inside the envelope, then what it tends to do is build up the internal pressure of the home and kind of tries to blow it up like a balloon.
But you can't seal off the vent at the top of the house.
You can. What you're going to do with that is you're going to use basically some plywood or some aftermarket type shutters. You want to make sure that these aftermarket shutters are approved and tested.
Explain what you mean by aftermarket.
This could be metal shutters. This could be pull-down shutters. some type of steel or aluminum type shutters. There's a lot of them on the market. A lot of them are used down there in Galveston and in the Beaumont area, especially after the storm came. There's also impact-resistant windows that are a big item right now. With the impact-resistant windows, you don't have to have a shutter system or protective coating on the windows. There's a couple of myths that are that have been out since I've been alive. And
okay, we're going to get those. I always see whenever there's any storm, no matter where I've ever lived, people put the big X's on their window with masking tape or some kind of tape. There's nothing to that, correct?
There's nothing to it. It's not going to hurt anything, but definitely it's not going to help anything. If you need something to do, what you get in the storm
is hold the glass together. It's going to broken, right?
Exactly. So you're going to have a bigger projectile flying around that's taped together. Mm-hmm. So what you really need to do is, if you don't have the storm shutters or a plywood system of storm shutters, you need to get those now and don't wait until the last minute. A lot of the problems associated with the shutters was people had these things in the code along the Gulf Coast in the Inland 1 area, which would be like Lake City, Friendswood, these areas on down Texas City. If you're in 120 miles an hour area, wind zone, then you will need to be required by code to get your windstorm certification to have exterior shutters. So the builders are supplying these now. The individuals who are building their own homes, they need to do that as well. And these are a shutter system. They're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4 long, stacked in the garage. Has a hardware kit with it, which includes all your nails or screws, whatever it's required to fasten it with. And those things need to be, what would happen is they were sitting in the garage forever, nobody, out of sight, out of mind, no storm coming. All of a sudden we have a storm. And a lot of these people want to evacuate, and they were calling contractors to go out there and install these shutter systems. You have to install them correctly. It's just like having a set of brand new tires on your car. If you only have 15 pounds of pressure in it, you're still going to move, but it's not going to perform well. So if you're putting these shutter systems on the incorrect way, then obviously it's going to do something, but more than likely they're going to fall off or tear off, and then they'll become a projectile.
And it's interesting that we learned in Galveston how many cracks there are underneath a door,
right,
or in a window, so that if you don't have a piece of plywood, you may not have any wind damage, but the horizontal rain will get through that crack and ruin your hardwood floors or your carpets or whatever's inside. And then you've got thousands of dollars in damage, even though the winds weren't that bad, just the big rainstorms. I have a question. The vents that are along the top of the roof that are required to be there.
Right, your
is
roof
is that a danger in this situation?
It will get driven rain in there. Some of the builders are going away from the ridge vents, and it's kind of a trade-off. It's great for your energy, and it's great to expel the hot air out of your attic during normal circumstances. But wind can get in there just like wind can get out. Mm-hmm. So in a high wind area,
can you get covering for that?
You can get coverings for that. That would be more of a tape issue there. Just trying to keep the wind from going inside these vents.
When you talk about wind going inside the envelope, growing up, it was always on one side of the house, open the windows just a little bit so the pressure doesn't build up. Doesn't do anything either. Huh?
Correct. Again,
all the stuff we've been taught really just doesn't work.
Everything we've been taught, exactly. The tape on the windows. The second big myth is the cracking the windows. The methodology behind that was you want to have the same pressure inside that you do outside, but that's not what quite happens. Again, that balloon example. You open up your windows, the air is going to get in, and then eventually it's going to go up to the attic and pressurize the inside and try to blow out the walls.
From a building point of view, is it the safest place to go is in the bathroom, get in a bathtub? Is that true or false?
Not necessarily the bathroom. Usually the tub allows us the safest place. Most of them are made out of some steel or some porcelain or fiberglass, something like that. So that's going to stop some sort of projectile at you. The best thing to do is have an evacuation plan or have a family plan, and what are you going to do in case of this?
And funny you should bring up evacuation plan, because we have the judge right here. Where do people find out what the plan is for their area? If they want to start preparing now to know if something should happen, what to do, where should they be looking?
Well, there are numerous websites out there, but if you go to I think it's readyharris.org. You can figure that out too. But I know Channel 2 will have it. All the stations will have websites that talk about evacuation
plans. How early
plans.
do you recommend people start knowing this stuff?
Well, you need to know it right now, and they will intuitively. When you talk about evacuation plans, we all know the highways. You drive them all the time. Just recently I drove out I-10 going to San Antonio, and you see all the signs that talk about evacuation routes. What has improved a lot year after year after year is our ability, and when I say our, the Department of Public Safety, the state, the county, everybody, to see what's going on the roads and make adjustments as necessary. We now have a new Bluetooth system up I-45, for example, where people can actually get real-time traffic during an evacuation. That's going to be a huge, huge help.
Because I think everyone thinks about evacuating. They think about those stalled cars. I mean, as much as you do, you can't get that memory out of people's minds.
One simple point is soon, if not before, as soon as there's something threatening, like even if it's in the Florida Straits, fill that car up with gas. Well, keep your tanks filled this summer. If you can't keep it filled every week, when you know something's coming, have a good solid tank of gas in your car in case.
Yeah, what we like to say is at all times maintain half a tank of gas at least. Because, talking about Florida Straits, I still remember the storm that popped up and was inland, 40 hours after it came up in the Gulf. It was a small storm, but those are the ones that really worry us. We have great plans for 120 hours out. And
we have 5 days to watch this.
But Mother Nature doesn't always work that way, and that's the problem. So everybody needs to assume that one could pop up and 24 hours later be inland.
And the judge is absolutely right. Alicia in 1983 went from nothing to a full-blown Category 3 hurricane on the Galveston beaches in 36 hours. Wow. A day and a half. Yeah. You can't evacuate Galveston in that amount of time. Certainly, if you only have 12 hours, you're going to need a lot of time to get all those people out. So that's why if you don't absolutely have to go, you need to hunker down. Right. I love that term.
We've got to let the people clear the barrier islands, the coastal areas first. And along those lines, what does worry me is we had 2 seasons with no storms. Now we have a new mayor of Houston, a new mayor of Galveston, a new county commissioner. They've all been fully engaged getting ready for this season. So the public needs to be fully engaged too. So that when all those elected officials start saying this is what you need to do, they got to listen.
Yeah. I look back again to the commute out of town, to the evacuation, and the stalled cars, the running out of gas, the congestion on there. What is in place to alleviate as much of that as possible?
Well, there are a lot of things in place. I mean, everything from the fuel supplies, much better organized. The private sector's addressed that issue. But the most important thing is a lot of people left during Rita that shouldn't have left. I mean, you can't put that many people on the road. So I think the public understands that if they're not in danger of storm surge, they need to stay where they are. Use that phrase, hunker down.
What about the contraflow? I mean, we don't test the contraflow, but we're confident it's going to work?
We're confident it's going to work, and we don't physically test it, but we game it all the time. And during Ike, for example, we kept looking at it, and DPS kept saying we don't need to do it. One reason you don't want to do contraflow unless absolutely necessary is it makes it that much harder for relief supplies and for people to get back in. But it is in place, fully in place, all the way to San Antonio, pretty much all the way to Dallas, and then out the 290 corridor.
When we talk about storm surge and our distance from the Gulf in the city proper, is that something we need to worry about? Not really. I know back a few years ago we're thinking these walls of water, a bad hurricane, how far in will water go? Houston is pretty much safe from that, correct?
Pretty much. Yeah. The one modeling problem that we have is the water that's going to fall out of the sky at the same time that the surge is coming in. So you've got the surge that's coming in, and then how fast is this storm moving? You can divide the forward speed of the storm into 100, and that'll give you an idea of how many inches of rain will drop out of it. The faster it moves, the less rain. The slower it moves, the more rain. So if it's moving 5 miles an hour, that's 20 inches of rain. If it's moving 10, that's 10 inches of rain. And 10's pretty standard. So if you have all this surge water that's coming in, and you have any flooding from that, and then you put on top of that 10 inches of rain, can you handle that? And that's hard to model because we don't know where that pocket of rain could be. So you have to be cognizant of where you are. When we were talking about where to go in a bathroom or whatever, still be very aware of your surroundings because you don't want to be in a flooded situation. So the higher you can get in your home is probably smart as well if there seems to be that flood situation.
Yeah, let me give you the best. Every storm's different, but Hurricane Ike, we all relaxed. The storm had gone. Sunday morning, a storm unrelated to Ike comes in and dumps how much rain?
16 inches
on us. So, suddenly Sunday morning, I'm waked up early and told the freeways are all flooded and people are driving backwards on them. And I'm going, this is a bad dream.
Where did this come from? I know.
Is that one problem that we have, that we see what we went through in the past, and we assume the next storm will be like that?
Absolutely.
Are we always looking back instead of looking forward?
One of the reasons the Rita evacuation was so bad, so many people left, they remembered Allison, which wasn't a hurricane, was a tropical storm, but they remembered that they'd been flooded, and they saw what had happened at Katrina
3 weeks earlier.
3 weeks earlier, and they went, oh my gosh, we've got to leave. So, yeah, every storm's different.
I mean, there were people still in the Astrodome.
Yeah.
When Rita was coming. It's amazing we went from the K storm to the R storm in 3 weeks.
And for those who don't know, they are alphabetical. They get named.
An amazing season 2005 was. But I mean, psychologically, I think people were just in a bit of a panic that, oh my gosh, this does happen. It just happened. We have people, 300,000 people from New Orleans were here. And here it's coming at us.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of psychology, but we've gotten through that. It's like any disaster. And, once it happens once and we understand the reality of it, we're able to deal with it better the next time.
Craig, looking at everything that has happened, what do you recommend people be doing right now?
The garage doors seem to be a big, weak area of homes. And it's a pretty easy fix. You can call your garage door company. What they'll do is they'll come out there if you don't have a windstorm rated door. There's things that you can do to definitely strengthen the door you have, especially on attached garages and houses, because once that garage door implodes or the wind hits it, and it's going to just, without the proper bracing or the proper hardware on the door, that's only 26 to 28 gauge sheet metal on those doors. So that's going to collapse. Then the air's in your garage, that's when it's starting to get the sheetrock done, and it's going to get up in the attic, and the air's just going to go on through the house. It's not necessarily the wind that is causing so much damage. It's the water, the wind-borne debris, or the driven rain. And with that in account, I learned a hard lesson in my insurance policy, and I want everybody to try to review their policies right now as quick as they can. You got your hail and your flood, which are two different policies. Or your windstorm and your flood insurance are two different policies. A lot of people got caught up in that mix. I wasn't one of them, thank God, but my father was, and thought he had flood insurance covering the downstairs, which it didn't cover. So you need to read these policies and read them carefully and go over with your agents, because even myself, I had some wind-driven rain come through my doors, messed up my hardwood floors. An adjuster came out, and I'm thinking, well, I got windstorm insurance, no problem. Well, that wasn't covered, ironically. And I do this for a living.
Yeah.
And if you're on pilings, you're not covered below the first floor.
Correct.
So
It's
people think,
base
well,
flood
I'm
elevation.
covered. But if your golf cart, your lawnmower, your fishing poles, which don't come cheap, if all of that's in that bottom area below the first floor, if you're on pilings, not covered.
So your base flood elevation, your normal policy will cover everything above your base flood elevation. So let's just take, for instance, if you're in a low-lying area like Galveston or Bolivar, I guess you could take that lawnmower up and stick it on your
That's what I would
in your
do.
living room.
I'd get everything. If you're being threatened,
all your valuables.
Take as many valuables as you can, put them on that first floor. And to that end, so many garages got blown out. Is it, if you don't have a secured garage door, if you're evacuating, would it be smarter to raise the garage door so the water can flow more freely?
If you're in the flood-prone areas.
Well, if you're in Galveston.
Yeah. Well, if you're in Galveston, again, nothing below the base flood elevation is going to be covered anyway.
I mean, to protect your house. I mean, then you just raise the garage door, and maybe it won't get blown out as much because the water would go right through.
You're talking about the garages underneath the pilings?
Yeah.
Most of that's supposed to be constructed as a oh, excuse me.
Kind of gives way in the storms that you're talking
Oh,
about.
like
Yeah,
a breakaway.
breakaway.
Yeah, but when we saw them, they weren't.
Right.
They were
Well,
dent away.
A lot
Okay,
of
they're
those,
telling me I've got 30 seconds left, so before I do, I want to go back to the judge real quick and just say, we always have that list of things people should have on hand, the water and all that. What's the rules?
Well, the rule is have a plan for what you're going to do. Make sure you have a kit and have supplies for a week at least, water. Keep all your medicine so that if you have to evacuate, you have all that with you, all your important papers, things like that.
Okay, gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you'll be back next year again. We'll do this again as we keep going.
Hopefully with no storm.
Hopefully with no storm. Now, each week we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS. Simply click on the local programs bar, pick Houston 8, and you can join our online community. You can read about the guests, learn more about the topic, and even watch past episodes. Now, next Friday night on Houston 8, we'll take a look at how social media is changing and how it's changing us. If you have a question or comment on that topic, feel free to email us at houston8@houstonpbs.org. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for joining us.